Mr. Nielsen,
Here.
Mrs. Contreras,
Here.
Mr. Rader. Mr. Rader.
Here.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Reyes,
Here.
Mrs. Sashanek.
Here.
Thank you. I'll take a minute and stand and recite the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. If you'd like to silence your cell phones, we'll take a moment here for a moment of silence and maybe just give some thought to the teachers, students, and all those who have been affected by the pandemic and this particular time. Thank you so much. Are there any statements from members of the board this evening? Amy, please, go ahead.
On December 16th, I was able to represent Littleton at the Arizona School Boards Association meeting. It was really informative. We got to hear about some of the new legislation that was passed as a board. I know Littleton voted to approve it at the time, but there's now a seat for the Native American population caucus as well as the African American caucus. And then we did elect the new officers of ASBA. Their names have left my head at this moment, but I know that I've received emails and we've all received emails with their names.
Thank you.
And thank you for attending.
And John or Sarah?
I just wanted to thank Amy for attending as well. It was a busy time for everyone, and so I appreciate that. Thank you.
Very good.
Mr. President, if I could have just a moment.
Thank you, John. I think the only
Yeah,
go ahead.
You know, I'm participating remotely tonight because my wife, who's a teacher, was diagnosed with COVID, and I think her first response to me after receiving that news was not concern over her own health, but concern for missing opportunities to be with her students and her colleagues at the school. And I know it's been a difficult week as we've returned from the break for many of our teachers, administrators, and all of the amazing staff that keep our schools going. So I just wanted to take a moment. I know this wasn't mentioned in the speech yesterday, but to just say my most sincere thank you to all of our amazing teachers and staff for what you're doing to keep our schools going for the benefit of our students. So thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. And that's a good thing to remember. Too many times we don't remember all the good work that they do to be with the kids, help with kids, and see that they do get an education. Thank you. Next item, Dr. Freeman.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board, those listening. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay. So, good evening, everybody. Buenas tardes a todos and feliz año nuevo. We're wishing you all a happier new year. 2021 brought more adversity than we'd hoped for, and we're continuing to hold on to our believe theme by believing in our community, believing in our ability to be resilient, and believing in our capacity to support each other. People may notice unfamiliar names on the board agenda this evening, so I'll take a minute to explain. We would like to congratulate Dr. Lisa Haid. Most of you have known as Dr. Kelly for many years, on the celebration of her marriage. You'll also see that Ms. Chizzy's last name is officially changed to Mrs. Garrison. We wish them both many years of happiness. Before I go any further, I also want to share our thoughts and prayers, which go out to Lisa for the recent loss of her father. While Lisa was fortunate to be able to be with him when he passed peacefully in his sleep, we know this is a difficult time for her and her family. It will be the first time in many, many years she's unable to join us at the dais. I'd also like to acknowledge, we know she's not alone in grieving. Many of our families have lost a friend or family member, someone they respected or admired in the last several months. It has been a struggle for many, and you have our sincere sympathies as well. We hope that the air will clear in 2022 and afford us a chance to heal and reconnect. Sometimes we have to look a little harder for a measure of goodness, happiness, and joy. So let us all resolve to be kind, take good care of one another, stay safe, and be healthy in the new year. January is School Board Recognition Month, and we join ASBA, the Arizona School Boards Association, in thanking our board members for their service. We all share the common goal of helping Littleton District students thrive. Every one of our members has a reason for deciding to serve, and we appreciate it. ASBA is posting videos on their website of school board members who represent communities across Arizona to tell why they decided to become school board members. Our enrollment this January is about 100 more than last year at this time, but still well below where we were at this time in 2020. We're heading in the right direction, but we know the pandemic has impacted school attendance here and throughout the nation. We traditionally emphasize student enrollment in the spring, but we want to remind parents they can enroll their students at any time. We have a dedicated enrollment staff at our Welcome Center, and they're here to help smooth the transition to one of our 8 academies, including our online academy, to find the best way to meet their family's needs. During the month of December, several of our Littleton school communities participated in food, clothing, and service events to support those in need. We always look forward to reporting on these to reinforce the value of their selfless service to our community. Quinton's Student Council created a toiletry drive, with each grade level acquiring different toiletry items to donate. The Student Council at Country Place held a canned food drive and raised 1,724 pounds of food, which provided 1,437 meals for families in need over the holidays. Tres Rios Pumas collected 2,162 items to support the City of Avondale food drive. Fine Arts Falcons were able to collect 350 pounds of foods for St. Mary's Food Bank. And we'd also like to congratulate the Falcons on their first successful online performance of Ballet Folklorico, their newest performing ensemble. You can still watch that on the Littleton YouTube channel if you missed it. The Superintendent's Youth Council is a leadership program and a forum for direct communication between our middle school students and the superintendent. The Youth Council participants increase their leadership skills as they share their voices on a variety of topics and advise us on issues that are important to them and to the district overall. Last semester, they shared their thoughts on our district's learning model, the value of their social emotional learning time, how student agency has impacted their learning, their school focus, and the ways their campus is engaging families in the community. One of the students shared this: "It was good to hear different opinions from students coming from all over the district, getting a small peek into what they do." He went on to share that I think students having a voice in their education is extremely important. Giving them that could be an excellent way for staff and teachers to give students the best learning experience possible, and hearing things from a different perspective. I would just add, on a side note, these kids are amazing. The kind of things they tell us, you'd be surprised. I am happy to report, thanks to the ongoing support of our community, that the district completed installation of ionizing packages on all of our air handling equipment ahead of schedule before the winter break. Computer-controlled fans circulate air across those units whenever the rooms are occupied. Omicron is spreading quickly through our community, sending people home from isolation and quarantine. Our last count of staff vaccination remains a little over 55%, and that's too low. Without more people vaccinated, it'll be hard to be able to provide in-person learning. To that end, we'll be hosting another clinic scheduled for Saturday, January 22nd from 10 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. It's our first Saturday scheduled. We've been doing after school so far to help protect our community and keep our classrooms open. We encourage our staff, students, community, and anyone else who needs to get vaccinated. I remind parents that booster shots are now available for youngsters 12 years and older. We've hosted our fourth vaccine clinic with our healthcare partners last month. And so Pfizer, first, second, and booster shots, Moderna boosters, Pfizer pediatric, and influenza vaccines are all offered. Our 4 clinics so far have administered 650 vaccines since beginning in September. Finally, in closing, I'd like to thank Beezer Homes for their support and impact new development has on our school community. And that's all I have this evening.
Thank you so much, Dr. Freeman. I now have proclamation I would like to read for school choice. Proclamation January 23 through January 29 of 2022, School Choice Week. Whereas all Littleton children should have access to the highest quality education possible, whereas Littleton recognizes the important role that an effective education plays in preparing all students to be successful adults, and whereas Littleton is a district of choice in the West Valley, allowing students to enjoy multiple program choices based on individual interests. Whereas educational variety not only helps to diversify our economy, but also enhances the vibrance of our community. Whereas Littleton has many high quality teaching professionals who are committed to educating our children, and whereas School Choice Week is celebrated across the country by millions of students, parents, educators, schools, and organizations to raise awareness of the need for more effective educational options that challenge and motivate all of our students to succeed, we now therefore be it resolved that as the governing board of Littleton Elementary School District, we proclaim that our schools will stand with the nation in recognizing January 23 through January 29, 2022 as School Choice Week. Thank you. All right. Ms. Vandewater, are you out there somewhere?
I am. President Nielsen, members of the governing board, Dr. Freeman, I'm excited to present to you our program showcase for this evening. Tonight, Mr. Atahani, principal of Littleton STEM Academy for Computer Science, will showcase Littleton's signature school focus through the lens of a computer science coding program, Computer Science Explorations. Middle school students will share paired coding problem-solving practices in Scratch, which empowers students to engage with computer science as a medium for creativity, communication, problem-solving, and fun. Additionally, Littleton STEM Academy will showcase their Kids at Hope Student of the Month, 7th grader Jordan Campos, and recognize a dedicated volunteer, Mrs. Christina Hardaway. We are pleased to welcome Mr. Atahani.
Thank you, Ms. Vandewater. Greetings, Mr. President, members of the board, Dr. Freeman, and the executive team. Today, we'll be highlighting one of the impacts of our partnerships to a grant we secured called the Amazon Future Engineer. The Amazon Future Engineer is a comprehensive childhood to career program to inspire, educate, and train children and young adults from underserved schools and communities to pursue careers in computer science. The Amazon Future Engineer offers qualified middle schools access to exploratory computer science classes through Project STEM. We have the benefit of receiving these courses, dedicated implementation, and ongoing support at no cost. Some of the resources that we receive are curriculum, so those are the materials that we use to teach the students. Recruitment resources, so posters and flyers to get students and community excited about the opportunity afforded to us. Intensive supports, so dedicated resources for implementation and ongoing support 7 days a week. classroom visits and real world connections. So we're able to connect our classrooms with Amazon engineers and opportunities to take field trips. And professional development. So there are fully aligned PD courses to help our staff feel confident in instructing this curriculum content. So what you'll see in the video is our middle school students working on paired coding to build their capacity when it comes to problems or errors they may come across as they engage in the work of coding in computer science explorations. Computer science explorations is the introductory course that you'll be seeing the kids working on. It's based in My CS, or My Computer Science in Scratch, that empowers students to engage in with computer science as a medium for creativity, communication, problem solving, and fun. Students start in CSE1, which is the introductory, which is what you'll see. Then next year, they'll navigate to CSE2, which focuses on artificial intelligence. And then year 3, they'll elevate or transition or go to CSE3, which is creative media. The one thing I want to share with you before we show the video is that the application process was actually quite involved. And I'm just really, I really want to extend a thank you to Ms. Armstrong, our assistant principal, and Ms. Mullins, our computer science teacher, for going through this process. So not only did we have to apply, we also had to interview, and then we had to go through an onboarding session in the summer to prepare for launch in the fall. And they really worked hard to make sure that this was a reality for us. So please enjoy the showcase video.
Hi, my name is Fernando Romero. I'm an 8th grader in Littleton STEM Academy of Computer Science. I chose to come to Littleton because I enjoy technology very much. In a computer science class, we've been learning animations and I created using code. We've also been learning that coding can be challenging and we need to use perseverance and have a growth mindset. And I think these skills will not only help me doing class, not only help me doing computer science, but also help me in real life situations and all classes. When I grow up, I want to be a computer science engineer and work with artificial intelligence, like robotics or robotics. I'm so happy I can go to Littleton to prepare myself for that job. Here are some pictures and videos of students in my school starting their coding journey.
Okay, when the green flag is clicked, Scratch Cat starts at the left of the stage and walks to the right. It works the first time the program is run, but after that, Scratch Cat does not start on the left side. Look at the coding program. Okay, so he has to come back. So he has to go like this.
That means he has to walk right back where he began.
So after this, he's gonna glide over here, and his coordinates are
180, negative 180.
so glide 1 second to, and now we can look at his coordinates. So,
Oh, I have it already.
and now let's run it. I like the left side. I like the right side too. And he comes right back. Yes, we did it. We debunked
Now let's
it.
save it, save our project.
It says add a second move forward block to reach the sheep.
So the sheep is here, and okay, so
So
it says
just-
when run, move forward.
So when I hit run and see how it goes.
So
I
we
would-
got one more block. So why did you change it to 200 pixels?
Because it's gonna give us like more blocks shorter because every 100, so you want to put 200 on the top and bottom.
Oh, okay. And so you changed it to 200 so that you could use only one block instead of two?
Yeah. And then the sides are always 100.
Oh, okay.
So let's run it. Nope, it was right. Yeah, figure it out.
Why are we doing all this in computer science? We can use the skills we are learning like growth mindset, and any job that we want after high school. This seems like a lot of work. How exactly are we going to do all this? The coding skills we are learning while making projects in Scratch will help prepare us for a job in the tech industry, like software engineering, animation design, website creation, and many more. So what exactly is Ms. Mullins wanting us to do? Our first big project we will complete this semester is to code an animated movie scene. We will plan out a movie scene and write all the code it takes to make it animated. Okay, but then what will we need to do? We will use our knowledge of events broadcasting the XY coordinate grid and writing sequential algorithms to make our characters come to life. Do we at least need to get a partner on this? Yes, that's what pair programming is all about. Collaboration is the best way to create and solve problems in coding. Oh, okay, I think we got this.
All right. Greetings, Mr. President, members of the board, Dr. Freeman, and the executive team. It brings me great pleasure to introduce you to Jordan Campos. Jordan has been a student at Littleton STEM Academy since kindergarten. He's a leader on the basketball court and has sought to bring that passion for leadership into the classroom. He is a good friend and supportive brother. He has a passion for the truth and is a highly personable young man. He continues to work towards being a positive and strong influence amongst his peers. And we want to congratulate Jordan Campos for being our Kids at Hope Student of the Month. Please enjoy the video.
Hi, my name is Francisco Campos, and I am a Kids at Hope because I challenge myself to get all my work done and not be distracted by anyone. And my goal is to have a brand new car and have my own detailing business by 16 years old. And I will always work hard for my stuff because it's not just going to be given to me. I have to work hard for it. The reason I come to Littleton STEM Academy is because my brother Jonathan, who is 21 years old, he came to the school for 7 years. And my brother Enrique came to the school for 7 years as well. And my brother Julian came to the school for 9 years. And myself has been going to the school for 8 years. And my sister Mia has been going to the school for 4 years, so it's a family tradition. My ace of hearts are my mom, my dad, my brother Jonathan, my cousin Zachary. Those are all my aces. My ace of diamonds are my cousin Zachary. He is always pushing me to not give up, and when I'm at my lowest, he's always there for me and pushing me. My ace of spade is Miss Lockhart because she's always pushing me to be greater and to work harder, and she's always tells me to not give up and keep going. If it gets hard, and I will honor her because she sets high standards for me. My best friend is my friend Isaiah because he's been going to the school for 8 years and he's always been there for me and always pushing me to be greater.
Great, just a great student. Really enjoy that guy. Great guy. And then finally, our volunteer of the month. Greetings, Mr. President, members of the board, Dr. Freeman, and the executive team. It brings me great pleasure to introduce you to Ms. Christina Hardaway, our volunteer of the month. Ms. Hardaway has been a part of the Firebird community for the past 5 years. The most resounding part of her volunteerism is how the relationships she's established at our community events have cascaded to a level of trust, comfort, and connection to our student body. We want to thank Ms. Christina Hardaway for her commitment to the Firebird community. Please enjoy the video.
Greetings, Mr. President, members of the board, Dr. Freeman, and the executive team. It brings me great pleasure to share some kind words of our volunteer of the month, Ms. Christina Hardaway. She is a constant at our community events, supporting staff with setup. She facilitates activities with students and families during these community events. She has been available in emergency situations to step in and help events to be a success. Whether it's taking charge or providing insight into how we can develop events, it's very much appreciated by all. She is always present at our PTA meetings and provides a helpful hand to our PTA president and board members through her thoughtful ideas and exuberance. And lastly, prior to COVID, she was always there for our staff members to support in the development and the facilitation of field trips. It brings me great pleasure to congratulate and highlight our volunteer of the month, Ms. Christina Hardaway. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Atuhaini.
Thank you so much. We appreciate that. Anything else on that item? If not, number 8, the call to the public. Let me read a couple of things here. According to the Arizona Open Meeting Law, any matter may be brought forth to the board by members of the audience, but they may not be discussed or acted upon at this particular meeting. And just a reminder that you have a 3-minute limit to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to present their concerns. So I have one here from Mrs. Villanos. Are you here? Would you please come up here? Make sure the microphone's on so that we can hear her.
Now I see a green light.
There, I can hear you.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Yes, I surely will. Good evening, Mr. President, school board members, and district administration. My name is Joanne Villanos. I am a teacher at Fine Arts Academy. Today, I am speaking as an individual. Because of the 3-minute time constraint, I will be reading my thoughts very quickly. As you know, our schools are struggling during this current wave of COVID. As students and staff get diagnosed with latest variant, we are doing everything we can to make our schools as normal as possible. It has taken a lot of creativity, patience, stamina, and understanding in order to get through a normal day. When you have a librarian, a nurse, a TOSA, paras, teachers, etc., all absent on the same day, you have very few individuals to call on for help, but everyone's pitching in and doing the best they can. The teachers are struggling, though, to not only rewrite their lesson plans at a moment's notice, but then monitor the health of their students each hour, sanitize, adjust the plans again, keep social distancing, and of course, try not to get sick themselves. It is simply impossible. Every day, we have no idea what the day will bring. It's the way of COVID. I absolutely understand that. We all agree that in-person learning is best for most students. However, we also know that at some point, other factors change the dynamics of the learning, and then it may not be the best. I truly feel that this is that time. Each day, more and more staff members are being diagnosed, and this is setting us all up for failure. Simply, we cannot run a school efficiently without a staff. We are not doing justice to their education. We are ourselves scrambling every day. We need a plan, a solid plan, that helps us give direction every day. An if-then plan, a plan that prevents the site administration in having to scramble each morning. They are our heroes right now. Shout out to Natalie Souch. We need numbers, we need charts, we need you. We need you to give us direction. I know that's really hard to do, but we have so many questions. How many students should be diagnosed in a class before we quarantine? Is there a magic number? How many teachers in a grade level would need to be sick before the grade is quarantined? Why does our staff not provide COVID days to staff instead of having them to have to use their sick days, despite us receiving ESSER funds? Can we go to virtual learning for a few weeks in order for us to get control of this variant? How does the district want us to handle grades for the children that are out? Some attend virtually, others do not. Most do not do any assignments. I need to know what to do and what to tell the parents. Now, with all that being said, I am a person who likes to identify problems, but also try to come up with solutions. Number one, if half the teachers in a grade level are absent, then go virtual. It seems counterproductive to split classes and then spread the germs even more. Considering so many staff members are sick, the district may also want to consider making the upcoming professional development days virtual for so many reasons. Let's think outside the box. How about asking bus drivers to help be class monitors for classes that are having to log in virtually while their teacher is teaching from home? We need your help. We need a plan. We need your thoughts. We will do whatever you'd like. We just need to know what to do. Thank you for your time and listening to my concerns. I hope you have a healthy debate this evening, no pun intended, and a productive meeting in trying to meet all of these decisions. I would love to stay for the entire meeting, but I think I'll go watch virtually. Good night.
Thank you so much. We appreciate that. Are some of those things staff can look at and get with her? And
Well, we already have it. Yeah.
okay, thank you very much.
It's on the agenda tonight.
Very good. We have a second call to public here. Ms. Granillo. Again, just a reminder, if you'd state your name, and then you have 3 minutes.
Hello, my name is Charisse Granillo. it's great. Can you guys hear me? Okay.
There
Hi.
you go.
Okay. Hi, my name is Sharice Granillo, and I wanted to take the opportunity to request that the board review case number 22-0108. My reasoning for this request is my daughter, who is at the middle of this disciplinary action, she's an honor roll student. She is in NJHS. She is a top performing athlete, and she made a decision to be a part of something that she now regrets. Included in her exhibits were paraphernalia, but that paraphernalia was not found on her. It was found on another student. So I'm a little confused why that was included, but the other student was not included with the case in a whole. I would like the board to reconsider the punishment that was imposed in the disciplinary hearing. Reading over the policy, it said it could be suspension from 1 to expelled, and she was disciplined till the end of the school year, which is 2022. Originally, I was under the impression, and so was Anissa, that it was only being considered to the end of 2021. So we thought after the month of December that she would be returning to school. If we had known that it was, if the school was recommending through the end of 2022 school year, we would have taken a little more time to fight for the case. In this instance, my daughter accepted accountability for participating in the using the drug paraphernalia, but now has since regret that. She has been suspended since the beginning of December, so we're going on a month and a half of no school for her. And I know we were suggested to go to the alternative program, but I don't feel like that would benefit my daughter in a way where she can continue to excel in her studies and in her athletic extracurricular activities. And also it would put her in a demographic where there's continued disciplinary actions and other children that have these continued problems, whereas this was her first disciplinary action on record.
You close up now, that's 3 minutes.
Okay.
Thank you.
So when it comes time to review the case, I would just ask you to thoroughly review and take into consideration my notes.
Thank you very much. We appreciate you coming and sharing that with us this evening.
Thank you, sir.
Again, we won't take action on that tonight, but get with you. Are there any others called to the public this evening? No. Okay. Thank you. Next item is consent agenda. Are there any members of the board that would like to pull any one of the items on the consent? If not, may I have a motion to accept?
Mr. President, can we please pull item B3, the long-term suspense appeal case 22-0108?
Repeat that one again, John, please.
I apologize, Mr. President. I believe it is, it was the case that was just referenced in the call to the public. It's on consent. I believe that is item 9B3.
Okay.
He needs to modify the motion to approve consent except for 9B3.
So I'll move that we approve the consent agenda with the exception of item 9B3.
I'll second that.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Are there any opposed? No. So 9B3. We pull that one, and is that one that we need to go in executive session for?
Yes.
So, Mr. President, if I could just note, I think, I know the parent may still be there, but it does look from the notes that the superintendent has already recommended to the board that the suspension length be reduced to the student returning after spring break. I think I don't know how much further we could to discuss that, but I did want to bring that to the parents' attention. And I don't know if that's a satisfactory result, but she was still mentioning in her statements that the suspension extended to the end of the year, whereas it does look like the superintendent has recommended a reduction.
If I can ask a question, was the parent notified of the change of the suspension?
Mr. President, Mr. Rader, Ms. Reyes, the backup material in your board view only has the documentation from the case with names redacted for student privacy.
Gotcha.
One of those is the letter from the superintendent that went to the parent that is copied for you as backup material. That was sent January 5th,
So
so
noted.
she's had it about a week.
Yeah, so noted, thank you.
So does that answer your one question there, John, or?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much of this we can discuss in public session, but as long as it's clear that it's already, and it's on the record that has already been reduced by the superintendent, I don't think I have any further concerns with this case.
So are you asking to take it back off and put it on a docket for approval based on the documentation in our current backup? I'm confused what we're doing.
Well, I certainly apologize if I was out of order by pulling it. My only point was that I would agree with the parent that a full year suspension was unreasonable, and I would just wanted to point out that to the parent as well as to the audience that I do agree with the superintendent's recommendation to reduce the length of that suspension. And with that, I guess other than that comment, I have no other concerns, and I'm willing to move it for approval now, or if there's further discussion regarding case specifics, I'm happy to move to executive session also. But I just wanted to make that comment on the record.
Yeah, as a point of order, Mr. President, members of the board, it is at the discretion of the board. You can move that now. I would just remind you, in executive session, you can have questions answered, but you can't rehear the case. You can judge the severity of the consequence, but you don't have to go into executive session. You may move to approve the superintendent's recommendation now, or wait until you've discussed it in executive discussion and then consider the superintendent's recommendation or another motion. I think if you don't want to change the motion, you can approve it now, but if there's a member of the board who wants to reconsider the severity, then you would wait. That's probably the easiest way to.
I'll make a move, we move into executive session I need some clarity now. I'm a little confused. So that is my motion. I'm not sure how everyone else feels.
It's later on the agenda, but you could take a point of privilege, Mr. President, if you want to do it now.
You need to leave a little bit later?
Yes, 8:15, but don't try to accommodate.
I'm just thinking if we want to do it, we need to move in executive session right now.
I don't think for me personally, it won't take long. I just need a clarifying, but I'm not comfortable discussing it in open session.
Okay.
Yeah, we just need to send a separate Zoom invite to John and Sarah.
We can do it now, but I'm concerned about a little bit later and it going too long that you not being here.
I appreciate that, thank you.
So-
I don't think that my set questions will not take long, so I think we could be in executive session and back out pretty rapidly.
Okay.
Yeah, and probably just leave this Zoom open in the
That's what I-
meantime and start another one in executive session.
Mhm.
Mr. President, you would need to,
Have a motion to move into executive session?
I don't,
So if I may I ask that I make a motion that if we could go in and move it up to current and move into executive session and change the agenda order.
I second that.
Okay. We will then recess for an executive session. If you'd like to stay here, that would be good.
So I've made the motion to move it, she seconded it, now we just need a roll call.
I'm sorry, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Thank you. John and Kathy, or John and Sarah, if you just hang on for just a minute, she'll send you a new Zoom link and we can get that taken care of.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Probably succumb to peer pressure.
I started to settle. It's going to be an expensive project. I just didn't feel like in the neighborhood there was kind of a cap on what those properties were worth with or without backyard. Right. Aaron decided to fill in and promote the shop. He and his brother-in-law rented a small excavator that weekend, and the two of them went out. At Sunday, food. They broke a pipe near the outdoor show. So they grabbed the show. Start digging up against the house. I see this plastic. They went out.
Are they back on with us?
Mr. Verrill, we're getting Ms. Contreras back on the call, and then we'll have a motion.
As soon as all the board members get back up online, we'll go ahead and reconvene.
You can move to reconvene without her. I mean, you need 3
Oh,
votes if you want to get moving.
All right, may I have a motion to reconvene from executive session?
I'll make, go ahead.
I move that we reconvene from an executive session.
I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
When the other ones come back here, we appreciate the information that has been presented tonight. And
I'm sorry. Who did we have vote aye? 4 people or 5? Or 3?
3.
3.
So we did not hear from John?
Right at this point, we are trying to make sure they're confirming on Zoom.
Okay, so we are 3-0.
That's
3 ayes.
correct.
All right, that'll work.
Sorry, I went ahead and
I'm
did
sorry,
that.
Mr. President.
No, no, no. You keep me straight.
Yeah, the quorum is us 3 right here, right now.
2 abstaining, I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
So let's wait till they come back here.
Yes.
Are they muted, unmuted? Yeah, you might need to, Mr. Nielsen, will you check to make sure they can hear you?
John, are you there? Can you hear me? Sarah, can you hear me?
Jim, are you muted now? Are you muted? You're muted.
John is muted until Mr. Rader. Okay, he froze. He was talking. Mr. Rader was talking.
Oh, there he's moving again. You're muted, John.
John, if you're there, you're muted. We can't hear you.
Maybe he's purposely muted.
Give us a hand signal.
Okay, so you're saying they can hear?
John, can you hear us now?
We can hear. Yes, sir, I can hear you.
Thank you. How about Sarah? Are you there too?
Yeah, I can hear.
Okay, so we've reconvened. We've taken care of that already. So we'd like to move out of sequence here. I take prerogative to go down to item number 21. I need a motion on that with the according, the number that would pertain to that. 9B3. Is there
I'm
a motion?
sorry, I'm confused. Are you wanting us,
So are we
are
making
we
a
in
motion to
21
approve
or
it?
the
Yeah,
consent agenda?
I'm going all the way down to 21.
Okay, so,
And on 21, there needs to be a motion for the,
The superintendent's recommendation for
case 2201.
0108.
so at this point, I'll move the governing board approve the superintendent's recommendation on the appeal of the determination of the hearing officer for student discipline case as outlined, and the case number will be inserted accordingly.
Thank you, Kathy. Have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Amy. I have a roll call on that one.
Mr. Nielsen?
Aye.
Mrs. Contreras?
Aye.
Mr. Rader?
Aye.
Mrs. Reyes?
Aye.
Mrs. Soshinek?
Aye.
Thank you. So with that, we would like to then proceed back to the rest of the agenda.
Item 10, Mr. President.
Thank you, Dr. Freeman. Item number 10.
At least for a moment longer.
All right.
According to the policies of the governing board, each year, the board determines who their presiding officer for the calendar year, not the school year, will be, because as elected officials, at the end of the election in November cycle, you take your seats in January. I have not had anybody talk to me about a burning desire to become board president, so I don't have any advice for the board. You do, however, have to have someone preside for the year. Someone has to be nominated, and I would imagine accept the nomination. So I think, Mr. President, the floor is open.
Do we have anybody that would be interested in taking that opportunity this next year?
It's been a while since I've done it, so I wouldn't mind doing it again.
Have you got time and availability to take care of that?
I think I do.
Very good. Kathy would.
Somebody needs to move it.
Oh.
I move that we nominate Kathy for the president for the calendar year of 2022.
And I will second that wholeheartedly. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you.
Dr. Freeman, do we need to have a vice president or someone who would follow in? If
The board may establish other officers as needed. That's all the policy says is you can do a vice president, clerk, a president pro tem, should the president be absent. In years past, we've had none. We've had, I think, vice president or, help me, Ms. Reyes, I think one time we did identify like a backup person. I can't remember what we called them.
I can't remember what we called them, but we had a backup in the event that the president or the chair was unable to.
Well, I will volunteer to be the backup, whatever that person needs to be, if that.
I think that's appropriate because it just keeps it smooth and running, and we can keep on. So
Okay.
with that, I'll make the nomination for a vice. Is it a vice chair?
It was vice president the last time.
Thank you, Vice
It's
President.
not specified in policy, so whatever you move, if you get a second, that's what it is.
All right, so I'm making a motion that we do a vice president, which is Mr. Nielsen.
I'll second.
I'll second that. Sorry, Amy.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
I think you have, did you vote the first motion already? Was
Yeah.
it 5-0?
Yes.
Okay, so then you need to vote the second motion?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Do I hand her the gavel, or shall I continue for this evening?
No, well, I think you change chairs after you've taken action, but if you, because of COVID, want to hold your ground, you can give her the gavel and not have her move.
I don't need the gavel, but thank you.
Ms.
you,
Reyes,
Kathy.
then you're presiding for item 11.
Okay, so let me get my bearings. All right.
We're looking at your calendar
Yes, thank you, I prefer that.
upcoming.
Yep, so at this time, the governing board's going to consider dates for regular governing board meetings. Dr. Freeman?
Madam President, members of the board secretary has gone through the instructional calendar and other calendars bearing and worked with me to try to come up with what we think is the best schedule of calendar of meetings. And there are some challenges with vacations. You're gonna see, let me make sure I have the right page here. Meeting dates adopted usually are for the second Tuesday. You can see on your list that we've right now only scheduled one meeting in March for March 21st. That's a third Tuesday because of holidays and spring breaks for our school district and for the high school district. What we did is instead of trying to have it right after the February meeting or right before the April meeting, just sandwiched it right in the middle of the two other meetings. So, of course, we may need to schedule something in addition to that in the spring, depending on what happens with the legislature, but that's 2023, so that's quite a ways away. We'll have time to make that adjustment. We also put on the schedule some special meetings. The board has said that they want to meet quarterly to discuss, board business and have study sessions. So those are listed. We recommend adopting that schedule so people can plan moving forward. Then, of course, dealing with things as they come up, as we always have, if we need additional meetings or to move things.
Thank you. Is there discussion or concern about moving having the dates as noted? If not, we'll move, I'll have a motion, or I'll have a reading.
This is John. I'll move the governing board approve the recommended 2022-2023 regular meeting dates.
Thank you. Do I need a second?
This is Sarah. I'll second that.
Thank you. Roll call. Aye is fine. Whatever's easier. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? None. Passes all 5-0. Item 12 is informational only. Dr. Freeman?
Madam President, members of the board, in some years we've put more of a policy review for board in front of you, but we have moved into a phase where auditors require us to have conflict of interest statements on file. I think board secretaries worked to get most of those completed. What we need to have on our agenda is that, we have covered these with you. So by putting this on the agenda for those policies in section B, G, and I about use of resources, values, behaviors, conflict of interest, and ethics is documentation that that's been done. And that, the form of that agenda will satisfy any kind of review going forward. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to try to address those.
Is there any questions on item 12? Hearing none, we'll move to item 13. Dr. Freeman on Fastbridge.
Thank you, Madam President. Members of the board, call your attention to the details in the screen. This was a follow-up to further questions from the monitoring report, and happened to be some items also related to specific goals that the board was looking at. So last year, we had 2 schools who piloted Fastbridge. The other 5 schools remained on a cadence because they weren't in the pilot. So last year's Acadience data is a little bit short in the raw number of scores, but it's summarized there for you. And I'm going to make sure, because that's a long ways away for me to read, that I can get my screen up here. To where it's easier. Okay, Fastbridge. Okay, I don't know that it's a good use of the board's time to read all of this to you. It took us a while to put it together because we've been a little short-handed. But what you can see is in kindergarten, those 5 schools grew from 14 to 33%. That's a pretty significant increase. The students classified as intensive dropped from 73% to 50% of the kids. I think everybody knows that 50% of the kids as intensive is not where we'd like to be. That hopefully would become a smaller number, but it shows good progress through the course of the year. First grade also showed good progress. Second grade did not, and from what I understand, talking to staff, the staggers in beginning, middle, and end, and the change in assessment has always been a problem. It's being addressed with staff, but we really don't think that it's a problem with the quality of second grade teaching. It's historically been there. Ms. Sosnick's nodding her head, so we're not alone in that. But the data started at 43%, and it didn't really increase as expected. The students classified as intensive was at 50% at the beginning and the end of the year. So they didn't move as expected, but I think part of what the board needs to understand is the expectation goes up with all 3 tests. So not moving up in a category doesn't mean you didn't move up. It just means you didn't move up enough to advance. Now this year, we have everybody moved over into the new assessment. And here you can see we're not comparing the beginning and the end of the year, but the beginning and the mid-year. The number of students who were at or above grade level grew 21% to 38%. So if you subtract that out, they would have only been at, 17% to start the year. The intensive number dropped from 8%, dropped by 8% to 31, so that would have been 39%. We won't have end of the year data. The assessment window closes May 13th to give staff some time to pull together the numbers, get those reports back to teachers and families. That's true for all three of these. The data timeline is the same. First grade grew 3%. The intensive number of kids identified as intensive at mid-year went up, and that's being monitored. Second grade, we're seeing pretty much the same effect. Intensive dropped 4%, and at mid-year, the kids didn't go up as expected. What we've done is we have instructional specialists and reading specialists at all of our schools. They're working intensively with second grade team to see what they can do about that. And then at the February meeting, Ms. Vandewater is going to have an update on the progress of the school's IAPs, and some of them had data on that. So you'll get more information at the next meeting. A little below that, you see Achieve 3000 data. This is a graph that the board's reviewed before, so this is new data. It looks a lot like the data did last year, where there is a gap between Littleton's Lexiles and expected Lexiles. What I did see in reviewing this is that there is an increase in the two tests at every test, and so what we were looking at is the gap. The distance between where our kids are and where we would like them to be is the green line. So there's an increase in Lexile levels for each of the grade levels. It starts out with the students down there in third grade, a 14% increase, then 10, 10, 7, 7, and 7 in grades 3 through 8, respectively. But the other data that's described in that paragraph for you is the percent of Lexile achievement toward the goal. And you can see third grade's only 44% of where they need to be, but by the time they get to 8th grade, they're at 79% of Lexile status toward the goal. That's the 710 to 900. So they're closing the gap each year as they go up in grade as well. While they're not reading at the level we'd like them to be, we're pleased to see progress in those increases. There is another graph on Dreambox usage, and that had to do with math. We've discovered here a kind of a conundrum that will be addressed with staff. And so the board set a goal to reduce the number of kids who had no usage or insufficient usage. And what we see in December is the number of kids who had no usage dropped, but insufficient usage went up. When we dug into this, what we found out is Dreambox's definition of sufficient usage is 5 or more activities in a month. We have a bunch of kids at 4. So they get dropped out of the data for whether or not they're on track. They could have 4 on-track activities and then be designated as insufficient usage. We think that's an area for teachers and students to really address, that there might be some kids who are, one activity wonders, that if we just pick up one more, we're going to get better data. So right now, we don't think this data is great, but we think we've identified what the problem is and have a strategy to address that. If we scroll down a little further, that was K-5. The 6-8 data has the kids doing 4 activities per week, only a slight incremental rise by a small decimal point. But last year they were only doing 2. So this year we have them slightly over 4, which is a huge increase for middle school engagement in Dreambox. And what we understand is that the kids like it and they're doing it. We're just not necessarily making it over that 5 activity hump. But anyway, having reviewed the data, everybody is aware of it and focused on that now. I think there's a little bit more, if we go down, is at the bottom of the list. So that is then the review of the data, following up on the monitoring report from school year 21 and progress on school year 22 on those reading and math measures that the board was looking at. I'd be happy to try to answer questions if I can about the data or what the implications are.
Questions on the items submitted?
Nope.
Hearing none, we'll move to item 14. This is Dr. Freeman as well. It's information only.
Okay, we've had some conversations about the aggregate expenditure limit, and it's not in my prepared materials, but I did see a thing in the paper, and I probably will attach it to the board update. It was an article written by one of our state legislators, Judy Schwabert. I don't know if anybody knows her. She seems to be a pretty bright gal who's written in the Republic an opinion on the aggregate expenditure limit and has attached a bunch of information as well as her thoughts, primarily being that education funding in Arizona is well, it ranks in the bottom of the country in both measures of effort and dollars. And of course, people are pretty disappointed that this did not come up in the governor's State of the State address at all. I'll tell you why. The aggregate expenditure limit, if we can go to the next slide, was established back in the 80s. And people may remember Prop 13 went into place in California. It was having some pretty serious consequences. There was an effort to avoid that happening in Arizona, so they came up with a different referendum or a different initiative. No, it was a referendum. So the legislature put this together, and it became part of the state constitution to limit the growth in state and government spending. So those of you who are familiar with the work of the city will know that cities can vote to have home rule and go outside of the limit. And so it created a baseline, and then school districts have an aggregate limit they work off from that 1980 baseline plus a growth factor. For those of you who are familiar with other government bodies that aren't struggling with this, one of the other things that happened back then is the state took over spending and spending formula. That money from the legislature goes to the Department of Ed to be distributed in state aid to schools whose qualifying tax rate is not enough to pay for all of their spending limit according to Title 15 state statutes. So when they did that, they aggregated that number. All of the state aid of all of the districts now is aggregated into one appropriation to the State Department of Education. That means that each of us cannot go out individually to our boards and ask to override it. It can only be overridden by the legislature, and that's the situation that we're in. One of the things that the legislator pointed out is there's been an attempt by some people to say districts are overspending their budget. This is just authority. The amount of budget approved by the legislature, which I'll remind everybody listening, is the lowest in the country, is over the limit based on this formula. So it's constitutional, which means they can't change it with a statute. They can't write a law to change it. but the Constitution does allow them to set it aside. To do that, they have to vote before March 1st. If they don't do that, there's a pro rata reduction. So that work has already been done by the Joint Legislative Budget Committee and the Arizona Department of Education. That's what the limit is and where it comes from. And the next slide, you'll see that the voters approved later in 86 a 10% cushion. Well, that was applied in 86, and so even with the calculations today, there's also a set aside of other funds that aren't included. So those are federal funds, state grants, other funds like adjacent wage cash funds, instructional improvement funds, and locally voter approved funds are excluded. However, if you go to reduce the M&O budget, a lot of those other local funds are percent of, like 10 or 15% of your other budget. So they would be or could be adversely impacted. Now there's a little bit of a history to the problem we have. I'm not sure if that's the next slide or not because I'm not peeking ahead. We have this clarification of what's in the constitutional limit and what's not in the constitutional limit. And there's two problems that have exacerbated this for fiscal years 22 and 23. One was that the Prop 301, when it went to the people, was considered to be outside of the budget limit. When the legislature extended it, they did it by statute. So it used to be outside the calculation, then this year it goes inside the calculation because the 20 years of the people's approval of Prop 301 has ended, and now we're in statutory law. The other is because there was a loss of enrollment in COVID, the prior year total student count dropped, and that's the basis for the calculation. So there's two kinds of things that are exempt. Those are things for special purposes or for sources of funds. And I listed some of those on the slide before, but this details what some of those are. If they are local revenue, is down the left side, special funds. And if they are special programs, what we've done here is if they're excluded for a special purpose, we put a P next to them. And if it's the source of funds exclusion, there's an S next to them. So we go through and do the work of taking all of the authorization of the district and then pulling out whatever those exclusions are, both at the state and the local level, to see how much money would be remaining, which would be over our share of the limit. Next slide. So here's the statewide authority. This was approved by the legislature and then reduced by the exclusions. So $7.2 billion in school-wide or statewide school authority. When you calculate the constitutional limit, it only comes out to 6. The difference is $1.15 billion over the limit, a little over 16%. The problem is if the legislature doesn't override this, all of the districts get a share of this number to reduce from their budget in April, May, and June. 16% of your budget in 1/4 of your year. Next slide. So here is the details on fiscal 21, 22, and 23. The limit's been calculated for last year at $6.3 billion, and what happened last year is, or last fiscal year, is because there was an enrollment drop. When everybody adjusted their budgets, you fell under the limit, and you didn't have to go back and address it. So we saw this effect of COVID decline in enrollment. 301 was still considered part of the formula. Now, in fiscal 22, you can see the limit is $6 billion. We just went over. Formula funding, exclusions, state excise taxes, all of that adds up to $7.2 billion in authority. The amount above is $1.243 billion And then there are some other exclusions. You can see the same problem occurs next year in fiscal '23, which we haven't even proposed a budget for yet. But if all you did was the minimum inflation into the state formula and didn't change anything else, the authority, which I'll say again for effect for the audience, is the lowest per pupil amount in the country, would be over the constitutional limit. So this is obviously a problem that has to be addressed. You can't continue to operate with $1.2 billion less than you're appropriated, especially at the very level low funding that we're at. And you can't take it out of the system with only a fourth of the year to go and not expect dire consequences. We really think it's a kind of a, I'm going to say no-brainer, but don't mean to disparage anybody, to approve this. The legislature has approved it 2 or 3 times in the past for this exact same reason. And what we understand is the governor and the leadership aren't opposed to fixing this because it's not a problem that was created by schools or school boards. It's a problem that's been created by these shifts in the economy and in policy. Next slide. What does that look like in Littleton? It's a $6.8 million reduction in our budget. Avondale, 7.7, Tolleson-L, 3.1, Tolleson Union, 17.1, Dysart, 28.4. Those are all millions of dollars that would have to be cut in April. It's essentially the equivalent of ending the school year in April, or if you wanted to keep 12-month employees on staff, sending the teachers home a little sooner. So what we're, well, here's some of the issues. Prior year count and current year count have been mixed around in policy. Overall, the low education funding has kept below the limits, but you had things like they cut all the capital and then restored district additional assistance. They cut the gifted funding and then restored it. SPED funding has been gone up, and you remember when the teachers walked out, there was the 20 by 2020 increase initiative. All of those things have created a shift in funding that was not accounted for in the formula for the aggregate limit. Prop 301 shift I've already talked about from being voter approved to legislatively approved. So it goes from outside to inside. Special ed in 1980 was essentially in its infancy. Those of us who were going to school in the 70s and 80s didn't see a lot of special ed kids or a lot of special ed services. They're everywhere now, and some of them are extraordinarily expensive. K-3 reading and ELL increases in funding and decreases in funding through the years. Career and technical education districts didn't exist. And certainly schools don't look today like they did in 1979. So those are all issues. Now here's the timeline. There's economic estimates that were already put in place determining the annual basis for the limit, and that's put out. In November, the state board determines if the expenditures of districts are going to exceed the limit. That's actually a collaborative process with Joint Legislative Budget Committee. That was done. These numbers came out a little before winter break, and we've been discussing them. And what we've determined is now that the legislature is reconvening, it's an appropriate time for the board and the community to be aware of what the numbers are and what the timeline is. If the legislature needs to approve by a 2/3 majority vote of both bodies to exceed the limit. And remember, it's not a expenditure limit, it's the funding formula limit. Nobody's spent $6 million more than they were supposed to. It's the $6 million that we're supposed to spend in April, May, and June. April 1 is the deadline for districts to revise their budgets effective of the reduction. So what we anticipate would be maybe some scenarios for the board in February, At the end of February, the legislature has to do this vote. If they don't, when we get to our March board meeting, we'll know how big the hole is that we have to fill. And the board will need to take action in March to address that budget reduction so that it can be implemented in April. Next slide, that's a timeline. So because there's 2 years on here, what we've proposed is a two-part solution. One is solve fiscal 22 by having a 2/3 vote, override that, do it now, don't wait till February 28th. As you get closer and closer to that deadline, I would expect the behavior of people to change quite a bit and maybe some crazy things to happen. So the sooner the better. The other is you have to deal with fiscal 23 and you need a long-term solution so this doesn't keep happening year after year after year. We think the first one should be pretty common sense. Next slide. What we're worried about is all of the things they're fighting down there, like critical race theory. I don't know anybody who was teaching critical race theory, but the governor brought it up in his State of the State address, that there are issues that down there that some legislators feel really ardently about and want to see put into law. Mostly those are the things that the court threw out that got tacked onto the budget because they couldn't get passed in the last session. And they're mad about Prop 208. They're mad about liberal school boards, and as the governor said, bureaucrats. So we're worried that some of the tenor and the kind of discourse happening at the legislature may get in the way of getting this done. It doesn't make any sense at all, but that doesn't mean that it couldn't happen. And so we believe it's important for the board and the community to be informed of what it is and what the consequences would be. And hopefully leadership can get members in line to get those 2/3. I'd love to see them do that in January so we could get on with finishing the year and planning for fiscal 23. I don't know if the members have any questions. If I can't answer them, I can write them down and go find an expert to get the answer for you. So I'd be happy to try to do that. And then I've kind of laid out what kind of action may need to come before the board in February and March, depending on what happens at the legislature and their progress on this issue.
Is there questions for Dr. Freeman? Hearing none, thank you, Dr. Freeman.
Can I just make a quick comment?
Of course.
President, thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Freeman, for the information. I think it's really important, and I'm not trying to add anything to your plate, that we have some of the concrete scenarios laid out sooner than later so that we can be communicating with our legislators and our community what the real impacts of this would be. And it's not being hyperbolic or trying to scare people. It's just clearly communicating what a 16% cut does at this point in the school year, which may mean kids getting out of school in April. And again, I'm not trying to inject any hyperbole. So I know you mentioned working up some real life scenarios by the February meeting, but I actually think it would be beneficial to have the scenarios as soon as possible so our legislators can be talking about them on the floor and that we can be communicating to our residents and our teachers what these cuts will be.
Yeah, we have, thank you, Madam President, Mr. Rader. We've tossed some of those ideas around. Of course, there's implications for different things you choose. We're right now self-insured for unemployment because we've never put anybody on unemployment. And so there may be an additional financial consequence to the district if we laid everybody off. We haven't figured out how that's going to work quite yet. Simply put, it's a fourth of the year, so if you took 16% divided by 1/4, those of you who remember how to divide fractions know you multiply by the reciprocal. 4 times 16 is 64%. of the budget for a fourth of the year. So, I mean, it's just, there really isn't much you can do. But we will work on that, Mr. Rader, and maybe, put some straw things together, and of course collaborate with the other districts in the region and the state for ideas on how other people plan to approach this. Different school districts have different amounts of cash reserves that they might be able to use to tide them over. We might have to use ours to fund unemployment, and they may have to also, as districts dig into the details and find out, what some of the different complicating issues are. We're working with colleagues across the state and with business groups to try to make sure people are informed and that we've thoroughly gone through alternatives. One of them being, if you try to stay open and burn through all your cash reserves, then you have no cash reserves in fiscal 23. Issues such as that, but I appreciate your concern. And I really hate to put out premature ideas that aren't very well thought through, and get whatever group is most impacted by them terribly agitated for no reason if it's not a real viable option. So we don't want to put anything out that's going to create a false sense of panic. Does that make sense to people? I see Mrs. Reyes nodding.
Thank you, Dr. Freeman, and that makes sense. And I certainly don't want to create false sense of panic and or become the focus of a campaign where it makes it look like we're threatening or being adversarial towards the governor's office or other segments of our state legislature. But I do think the flip side of that coin is our parents and teachers need to know the real life consequences of something like this so that they can also be advocating in their best interest.
Thank you. All right, with that, we'll move on to Mr. French, who will discuss emergency compensation and regulation under DKAR. And this is an action item. So, Mr. French.
Thank you, President Reyes, governing board members, Dr. Freeman, Littleton community. As you may know, the district had a network emergency over the winter break. We had a select group of employees that came into work to work on the network and ensure the district was ready for school on January 3rd. This evening, I'm bringing before the Board a regulation the district recommends attaching to district policy DKA payroll procedures and schedules, which would allow the superintendent or designee to declare a district emergency for items like the network disruption. The emergency would be specified for a period of time, and classified employees needed to address the emergency would be compensated at 1.5 times their hourly rate for hours worked outside of the employee's posted work hours and or designated holidays. Exempt staff would be compensated with leave in half-day increments of leave based on time worked. The district had 3 employees that fell into this category over the network emergency, and we are asking the board to approve emergency compensation this evening. Jim, can you go ahead and open up the next item? Or yeah, sorry. You'll see that this compensation will cost the district less than $2,000, and we avoided having to delay the beginning of school on January 3rd. So I'm happy to answer any questions that the board has, but this is the action item this evening is to approve the additional compensation for these 3 employees.
Is there questions on any of what Mr. French presented? Hearing none, yes.
Sorry, Mrs. President. Mr. French, if I could just for a second, and certainly support the compensation for work completed. I guess I'm struggling. Do we not just pay overtime when folks go beyond their, let's say, 40-hour work week? If it hadn't been an emergency and we needed staff to come in on a Saturday for a special event, wouldn't they be potentially compensated time and a half for anything above and beyond already?
Thank you, Madam President, Member Rader. The way that this had worked in this situation specifically is that we had a couple of holidays that ran as part of that week. So the employees only get time and a half member rater when they physically work over 40 hours that week. What we're looking to do here is if they work any designated holidays, that they would receive that compensation as well. We had these employees potentially working Christmas Day and Christmas Eve, taking time away from their families and helping the district get back up and running.
Did that answer
Is
your
that it?
question?
Yeah, no, thank you very much for that explanation.
All right, hearing no more questions, I'll ask for a motion.
I move that we approve the emergency compensation retroactive to December 22nd for the listed staff.
I'll second that.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, passes unanimously.
We have to check or.
Any opposed? Oh, yeah, because they're online. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. Number 16, Mr. French.
Thank you, President Reyes, Governing Board, Dr. Freeman, Littleton Community. This evening, we're asking the board to award the invitation to bid for the Littleton Head Start expansion. The Governing Board approved the release of an RFP and qualified select bidders and an invitation to bid for to follow for the Littleton Head Start expansion at the September 14th board meeting. Upon the release, the notice of invitation to bid was sent to 5 qualified bidders and was selected from the RFP outcomes. Out of the 5 vendors, the district receives 4 responses. The determining factor for award was based on the lowest responsive bidder, and SD Crane was the lowest responsive bidder at $2.2 million. The vast majority of the funding for this project will be provided by the Head Start program, with the district assisting with some adjacent way funding for the ingress and egress of the new building. I've attached site maps for the board showing you where the new building will be located in relation to the rest of the Littleton campus, as well as a building drawing showing the 6 preschool classrooms this project would build. If the board approves tonight, the district asks the board to approve the invitation for bid for the Littleton Head Start expansion to SD Crane. So this is showing you the existing preschool facility at Littleton, as well as, Jim, if we can, as well as the existing building A, which we retrofitted for Head Start 2 years ago. And the new building would be situated right there in between those 2 buildings, creating what we'd like to call a Head Start campus. And then the other item here is the 6 classrooms with bathrooms for the Head Start kids. I'd be happy to answer any questions that the board has.
Is there questions for Mr. French? Hearing none, we'll have a motion.
I'll go ahead and make that motion. The governing board approve the award of invitation for bid for the Littleton Head Start expansion to SD Crane.
I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Are there any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Item 17, Mr. French.
Thank you, President Reyes, Governing Board, Dr. Freeman, Littleton Community. For this item, we are reviewing the transportation corridors and boundaries for the FY 21-22 school year. The transportation staff are not recommending any changes to the attendance area transportation corridors for this school year. The limits on transportation will continue, and families would need to take into consideration the availability of transportation services when selecting a school choice program. The 2 areas currently restricted are the area north of the freeway, McDowell Road. Transportation would not be provided to Estrella Vista and Fine Arts, and the area south of the Gila River, Indian Springs, where transportation is not provided to Collier, Quinton, and Littleton. These transportation corridor restrictions will remain in force, but exceptions would be permitted in exceptional circumstances only to maintain program capacity as needed. I did want to let the board know this is the same boundaries approved by the board in FY 21. The district asked the board to approve the present transportation boundaries as presented.
Thank you. Is there questions regarding the transportation boundaries for Mr. French? Hearing none, I'll take a motion.
I'll move the governing board approve continuing with the current transportation corridors / boundaries.
Thank
I'll
you.
second that.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Is there any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. We're moving on to item 18. Dr. Freeman?
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. If you're watching the news, you're aware of the controversy around workplace vaccinations and masks and testing. The federal government, the Department of Occupational Health and Safety, has put out guidelines for large organizations to have employees either vaccinated or tested weekly. We have some guidelines on those. Either they have to bring in a negative test, or have a proctored test. As you're aware, there's shortage of testing materials right now. What happened was it was appealed to the Supreme Court and stayed. Then the stay was lifted because the federal government said they would not begin enforcement until the middle of February. But there is still a question before the Supreme Court on the legality or applicability. And from what we understand, the court had some questions about a blanket requirement for everybody versus one that was targeted and strategic. For instance, the one for healthcare providers is a smaller group for a particular reason. So we are not sure between now and the time this would go into effect how the Supreme Court would rule, but we have a feeling that there may be changes and that the agency may make changes. However, what we've done for the board today is we've put together, given the current rules and what we know about them, a mandatory vaccine requirement draft to review with you tonight. So on this draft, we've gone through and put together what we think is pertinent information, the purpose and the scope. Essentially, right now, if people are exposed or are infected, you have a test to return. This would essentially be a test to stay at work if you are not vaccinated. So we've outlined potential procedures with a deadline of February 22nd. That's from the feds, and then considered fully vaccinated 2 weeks after receiving the requisite number of doses. If you have proof of vaccination, what those forms would be. Other information supporting leave and time. We do give paid time off to people for sick leave and for personal exemptions, or personal reasons. But how that would be used, how they'll be notified and removed from the workplace, stipulations on testing, must be tested at least once every 7 days, documentation presented, person who doesn't report to work. These are all pretty much stipulation and guidelines we've pulled right off of websites and other places, but to make them local and to describe how they would be used here. I don't think you can see confidentially, privacy, how we'd handle new hires. So we've done our best to try to lay everything out. I don't know if the cities had to start working on the same thing. If you see anything that we've forgotten, can bring to our attention, offline. I'm sure we're all working on drafts on this. So and what the consequences would be if we had more resignations because of it and those kind of things, that could be quite challenging. I don't think the board I mean, I think the board should take some time to read this and see if they have questions. I don't know if there are any tonight. I don't know if I can answer them, but I certainly will write them down and research them. I think, we have till the middle of February to do this. We have 2 more meetings where we could go over this, and things may be changing still. But I thought it was important for you to see what it might look like, and for our employees to see what it might look like. Certainly, if people want to, who have been resistant to get vaccinated, get started on their regiment, to be out ahead of this. I think we are going to see more and more of this because of the implications of unvaccinated people on healthcare, hospitalization, our health insurance. There's a whole bunch of implications for other people. For the degree of illness created when you have unvaccinated people. And then what we're dealing with right now is the huge amount of exposures from Omicron, whether you're symptomatic or not symptomatic, sending people home for at least 5 days. And it's going to hit us more this week. You heard from one teacher tonight. We had set guidelines for 2 teachers per team, or 33% of the kids, to go remote. And we had fine arts get pretty close to that yesterday. I haven't heard about today. But the commitment we made to the board and the community was, if we had to go to remote, would be to do it in the smallest increments of time and school units. So we have had 1 or 2 classrooms sent home. I would imagine we're on the verge of maybe sending a grade level home again this week. And if this continues the way it has been, whole buildings, corridors, or even schools, even though nobody wants to do it, if we don't have staff to supervise kids, we're kind of right back where we were at Red for Ed. We can't just put 500 kids in the cafeteria and show movies and be safe. What we think we'll want to do is give parents weekly increments so that they can plan with their workplaces and other things like that. Anyway, I think what the experts are telling us, if more people would be vaccinated and keep their masks on, we might have a chance. But kind of given the politics of Arizona and people's behavior so far, there's a great potential we'll see more and more action like this from the federal government and some other big businesses and those kind of things. So I don't know that it's going to happen or it'll look like this, but I think we should be out ahead of it in our planning and our discussion. So are there questions or things that we should be considering or researching the members are aware of? And Madam President, do you think you want to see this again in January or in February? There's a lot going on, so.
Yeah, we've also built a shell in our organization as well, really just pulling OSHA regs and copying and pasting. And there is still a lot of unanswered questions, so for me, I need to read it really carefully and think about it, and we need to watch, the Supreme Court, see what decisions are going to be made. There's a new ruling as well that just said that we will pay, the insurance companies will pay for home test kits.
Yeah.
So that changes a little bit of dynamic in how you're going to buy them at Walgreens and get them paid and reimbursed. So I think we just need to sit tight and see. I like the shell. We did the same. We built the shell and sit tight and watch and see what happens. Board members' comments, thoughts?
I would agree with you, Madam President. I think things are so fluid and just changing right now. I think it would be wise to see how things revolve.
Okay. Mr.
I just got a couple of things. I'd like to go, like you say, Madam President, to go through and read it and just think what's there. So do we have to take an action on that or what?
No,
we can
I think you really could wait till the February meeting to take action, but I don't know if you want to wait till then to start considering
Right. So
what might happen and what the implications might be.
Anyway, would the policy accept self-testing? Can I test myself at home and bring it?
No, it has to be proctored.
Okay.
You can bring it to school and do it in front of
whoever.
Yeah, I don't know that we picked a person, but I think we have to.
And what happens if there's no testing material? I was over at Walgreens earlier today, 4 different signs there in front of the thing, we are out of COVID testing material here.
We have a few left. We offered a test kit to every teacher before winter break to take home and asked them to test before they came back on break, so we didn't have people coming sick to work. There's a few around. We are on a waiting list at the county who has been helping provide those for school districts. But as you mentioned, they're in short supply. And, you know, what I think from the news I watched, the Biden administration is confident they'll have some kind of, what do they call that, emergency manufacturing, military crisis thing. You know, they're intent on doing this, and so they're going to make those available. We are concerned about the insurance thing. We were talking about that today, the number of tests per person per month or whatever, and so that could easily break the bank on your insurance plan.
That's exactly what we started.
So that's, unless the federal government's paying for those, that's a problem. There's a lot of problems.
Just one last one. Is there a size of the company or the size? I think you remember one time that says this applies only to a company over 50 people or less than 50.
I think it was 100, but
Okay.
we qualified right away.
Okay.
We didn't debate that, but
Well,
I think if you're a very small company, you might not have to do it, but I don't know how small.
Well, interesting enough, I have a good friend of mine who works for a very large grocery chain and is in pretty high chain of command, advised me today that she received notice from the federal government. They had bought hundreds, if not thousands of kits and had them in a warehouse ready to go, knowing that people were going to be able to get reimbursed. They were advised they're being seized.
By whom?
The federal government.
Oh, the grocery store chain had them.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of interesting dynamics.
I thought the prior administration was the only one who did that.
Yeah, no, I think there's some interesting dynamics, so we'll just sit tight. It sounds like everyone's in agreement.
Okay, well, we don't have any in our warehouse right now, but there might be in somebody's desk drawer if you knew who to ask.
Yeah, Dr. Freeman and Madam President, I would certainly agree with your comments as well that this is entirely too fluid to make any determinations right now. And I definitely agree, would like to read this a little bit further. Just one comment. I think a lot of what I've been hearing too is that the efficacy of the vaccine is really improved with the booster shot. So I don't know if, again, this talks about a 2-dose vaccine or whether it's the vaccine, a fully vaccinated person is actually 3 doses, or how the booster and or subsequent boosters play into the policy as well.
You know, we just checked into that ourselves, asking, and right now, again, as of today, at 7:58, the definition was just the 2 dose. The booster was not in the direction at this time, but now they're saying there'll be a 4th booster coming in February.
It's going to be a series. I don't know when they're going to stop calling it boosters. But
Yeah, me neither. So I think still that's very fluent, and who knows what the definition of fully vaccinated will actually become.
Yeah, I mean, Madam President, members of the board, I don't, for people who've already had 2 shots, I don't think the booster is a problem other than just managing your time. Yeah. It's the people who aren't getting shots. And the other thing that we heard today was Pfizer is working on a new Omicron modified vaccination. If they, they know the science now, then they would have to, test they know the delivery system, they know the production and distribution model. They just need to test the new DNA information on a serum, but they're saying with production already, issues already worked out, that there may be an Omicron variant vaccination by March. So we'll see.
Yeah, definitely tons of moving parts.
Yeah. I don't know that we need to discuss this a second time in January unless members have things specific, but unless this is clear, the deck is cleared on this somehow, it would have to be on the February agenda.
Yeah, I think it gives us time to read it and really analyze it and ask questions, because I think each one of us has lots of questions as well as everyone else. So
That was our intent.
we'll table it and then bring it back when whatever fluid settles down and we have a little bit more concrete information. With that, Dr. Freeman, we're going to turn it over to number 19, to you, a mitigation plan for safe return.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. As I've said earlier in the meeting, we're dealing with a different dynamic now in the virus spread with Omicron. And, part of the reason you're still seeing concern about hospitalizations is because even though it is less likely to hospitalize somebody, it's half as likely to hospitalize somebody, but it's more than twice as likely to spread. So the example the county health department gave us was if Omicron gets 6,000 people sick, but only 3% go to the hospital, that's 180 people. If Delta only got 2,500 people sick, even though it's 6% hospitalization rate, that's only 150. So the fact that this is spreading so much and so fast is what's keeping pressure on the system and workforce, restaurants, airlines, and school districts where you're having to quarantine people. So our suggestion to the board tonight, we have to revise our plan with the Department of Ed every 6 months. That is in your attachments. We have a problem with Maricopa County's school and zip code specific data. I checked this afternoon before I came out here. We still don't have that for last Thursday. But what you can see here is both the state and the county shot up dramatically in last week's report. We don't have the like I said, the city zip code school district data. But this dramatic increase in illness is reflective of, and here, if you scroll down a little further, that's district data points and county data points. If we smooth that with 2-parameter smoothing, you can see the trend in those curves is heading up sharply. And so the issue is that data goes back to December 26th, the most recent data we have, and that's the day after Christmas. So that isn't giving people 5 days to get sick after Christmas yet. We anticipate illnesses are going to go up even more. If you scroll down further, you look at the county epidemiological data, and you see that huge spike at the end, and that's illnesses. And you can see how it looks relative to the big spike we had last January. And so that certainly has gotten our attention. What we're proposing doing on the expectations for return and the safe return, this is the chart, basically the 3-color chart we've been reviewing with the board. And what we've done is tried to stay in the yellow, which gives us the opportunity to have in-person learning. But we've gone down and recommended that we make a few changes to try to avoid large gathering places and places where we might have spread. So one of those, as you go down the list, you can see that we still have field trips as virtual only. We're keeping the extracurricular clubs configured the way we have them. Before and after care is really being handled by Boys and Girls Club. We don't have really that to address at this point. If you scroll down a little further, what we've done here is we've moved some things over to the red. So our recommendation is, we had a few people in the room tonight, is that if Omicron continues to spread, we go back to virtual board meetings. As Mr. Rader said, there's a bug in his house, and that's part of the reason he's being remote. I don't know if the board wants to go all remote or if you want to continue to kind of have a hybrid or blended approach or on a meeting-by-meeting basis. But we think it probably wouldn't be wise to invite audiences into the boardroom at the rate this is spreading. So that was one. If you keep going for our internal meetings, we had talked about Make Your Day masks. We were looking for ways to give people some relief from masks because they've been wearing them so long. We were going to put into effect an 80% rule. If 80% of the people were vaccinated and agreed that they didn't need to have masks, they felt safe. We've kind of abandoned that for now. We think masks are going to be really important to continue. There's no change really in nursing services. We have to interact with people there. If you can scroll down, we have internal meetings and consulting coming up on this list. Did we go past? Oh, there it is. It's on the top. Is moving those to virtual. So this Friday, we're supposed to have professional development for the district. We're moving it to virtual. I think the only thing that's going to be in person is the bus drivers' bus rodeo, where they work on driving skills, which, we don't have a simulator for that, but everybody else is going to be remote for professional development on Friday. And what we're telling people is if you don't have to be in person, don't be in person. And we've already designated job classes of people who are eligible to work remotely. And then if there's exceptions, we've given supervisors authority to make those exceptions as long as they're responsible for the work being done. Make Your Day, like I said, we've already agreed to have that go virtual. I don't think that's going to be a problem for our community, our parents, our staff. And then the last thing was, if we scroll down a little further, was travel. We do have some external meetings, here in the county and with colleagues where we're wearing masks, but we're recommending no more out-of-state travel. We may bring some things to the board for meetings like in April, and the board is scheduled to go in April, with the idea that if the amount of spread in the community and illness drops, the procurement will be approved and we'll be able to execute it. But if it doesn't, we just don't follow through on the purchase orders and the requisitions and those things. We need to get the board approval out in front, but that doesn't mean people are going to go if the metrics are still high, but it does allow us to move our paperwork forward. So you may still see travel items, even though right now we're canceling trips, January and February. We're in the process of canceling all of those because of the spread of Omicron. That's really the changes from the chart from what you've seen before that we're recommending. Jim, if you'll open the other attachment. This is a form that the Department of Ed came up with. It's kind of their response to aggregating data from all of the districts so that they can report to the feds that we're all planning for safe return. So we've gone back and forth with them to make sure that we have all the right things in all the right boxes for them. And because we have this other document, really what we're doing here is a lot of referencing to other materials and policies. You can see there, governing authorities, education agencies, relations with other schools, basically delineating some of that out so it can be merged with other districts and with other states for the feds. So this is probably more of a compliance document to make sure we've covered all the things that they need us to comply. And we have to have that go before the board every 6 months for your review and the review of the public. Those are all the materials we have. I went through some of that pretty quick, but I know it's not the first time you've seen a lot of it. And so we do have action on this because of the changes and the state, the Department of Education form.
So at this point, I'm going to open it up for questions regarding the changes Dr. Freeman referenced and take questions on that. No questions? No questions? Any questions?
Sorry, Kathy. May I just make a comment real quick?
Of course.
Thank you very much, Madam President and Dr. Freeman, for that information. And I'm really glad to see, to Mrs. Vianos's point earlier in the meeting, that as much of the professional development is moving remotely as possible to provide our teachers with some sort of break. I guess maybe this isn't fair to administration, but as we sit here and review the documents, it seems like there's a little bit of a disconnect between what the teachers and our maybe administrators are actually feeling, where the situation maybe feels at the site level a little bit out of control and they don't know from day to day what the next step is. Is there something we can do to help address some of those concerns that Ms. Vianos brought up and bridge maybe that communication gap, or are things just so dynamic that it's, to some degree we are kind of living day to day with the data?
Thank you, Mr. Rader, Madam President, members of the board. So she's from the Fine Arts Academy, where they had, like I said, a high number of teachers out yesterday. And we have a couple things going on. So one is some of this is fairly new from after winter break, right? I showed you guys a chart in your weekly update last week about how Omicron has taken over Delta just in a matter of 4 weeks. The other is we put in place this staggered coverage plan that was related to the sub-plan from the teacher compensation plan we did before winter break. So now there is a descending sequence of covering for rooms when there aren't subs. That includes special areas and paraprofessionals and other people. And so that is now a district-wide plan. What we think has happened, a couple things relative to her comments, is if that plan hasn't been implemented in your school where you're at, you probably haven't seen that plan, because that is all of 5 days old. The other is this idea of at what point do we send the kids home and do we send the teachers home? That has also not been executed, and we have different numbers of teachers at different grade levels. So we didn't set the number at 50%. We set it at 2 teachers in a team. And what we had happening was people were trying to stay in person because they thought that's what we wanted. And the direction they got at the beginning of this week is once they get to that level, we need to send people home for 5 days. And I think we're going to get some pushback on that. But the other side of that is if everything is day to day and we don't know what day it is until the kids already show up, it's too late to tell them not, to go remote. So we think the smallest increment, given the current mitigation rules, is a 5-day remote assignment. And we haven't pulled the trigger on that yet. But that's been my experience, Mr. Rader, in dealing with a lot of these things is the building level administration may not have called a meeting to communicate that to everybody. They're probably going as fast as they can to keep up with what's happening at their school. I know you're familiar with that campus as well, and a lot of the things that are happening there. So there probably is a little bit of, us still catching up to ourselves communication-wise. But the other thing, be my observation is people pay more attention to that when it impacts them directly than when it's just a laid out list of sequencing things. I think the point I made to staff today was they were trying to keep kids in person, and I think at the rate we're going, it's not going to work. We need to take a chunk of isolation and quarantine in these a minimum of 5-day increments. That's going to be hard for people. I mean, there's a little resistance to that even amongst teachers, but I don't I don't know how else we can make this work, because families have got to know, what to expect to do with their kids, and not on we had, I don't know if people are aware, but when we weren't opening school last year, the charter school they had people driving up and being told there was no teacher today, and as they were trying to drop off their kids, and that's not the way we treat our community. So we are trying to figure that out a little bit. I think we're further ahead than she realized. And so, for instance, I know Miss Musel, who's in charge of professional development, sent out a thing today that said there had been a lot of questions about ProDev, and this is how it was going to be handled. The majority of that ProDev was already virtual, so there were only a few segments that needed to be transferred over. We weren't that concerned about that because the majority had already planned to be remote because people are at different locations and things. So people are working from the data set of the data they have. It's not always the same as ours.
No, thank you very much for that explanation, and I appreciate you taking a moment to address some of the concerns that she raised. And just want to reiterate, I know both our administration at the district office as well as at the sites, and our teachers and everybody are just trying to work as hard as they can to adapt to extremely difficult circumstances. So thank you again for all that you're doing.
Thank you, John. Kathy, our president, had to leave, so she's asked me just to finalize this. Any other questions of Dr. Freeman at this particular time? If not, we do need a motion on that one.
To adjourn.
No.
Mitigation, yes.
On the mitigation plan.
Still need action on that.
I move that the governing board approve the updated mitigation plan for ESSER, safe return to in-person instruction and continuity of services.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Amy. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The last item, we've done 20 and 21. Last item is 22, which is adjournment. May I have a motion to adjourn our meeting this evening?
I move that we adjourn.
Thank you, Amy. A second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Sarah. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you all for being here in attendance, all those who aren't there, and
No opposed. You didn't vote.
I no.
4-0.
4-0, thank you.
Curtis wants to stay.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody. Thanks.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night.